Got it. Well, let me start by saying my name is Ariel and I am an alcoholic. Or as I like to think of it, as I'm an alcoholic and it's all Ariel's fault. I'm so weird. I'm still not used to this Zoom meeting. Usually you get a hi, my name is Ariel, and everybody's like, hi, Ariel. It's just everybody on mute. You don't get that same effect. It's been a while since I spoke at a 1 hour speaker meeting. I think I took a little bit of a hiatus from speaking in 1 hour speaker meetings. I don't know why. I noticed that if I start doing it for a while, I love to think about myself. And I know that when I start to think about myself, it becomes a mess. So let's see if we can cover some ground. I grew up in a little bit of a roller coaster of a house. My dad kidnapped me from my mother when I was about 8 months old and took me to Israel. My mom, in an attempt to get me back, went to Israel and tried to swim across the Jordan River with me on her back. This all happened before the age of 4, and I don't remember any of it, but I think it's important because what happened is I started developing ways to survive. You know, as a 4, 5, 6-year-old kid, you learn all these things. You got an alcoholic dad that beats you. You learn ways to get around that. You learn how to make a joke and make people laugh. You know, some people call it trauma. I call it a sense of humor. Those survival skills later on in life, though I wasn't able to just dispose of them, became some of my loudest character defects, if you will, throughout sobriety. My father loved me so much, very intensely, but with that same intensity, he would rage and lose his shit. And sorry, I'll catch myself. He would lose his mind on me and sometimes hit me. He took off. He brought me back to the States. I started living with my mom when I was about 11 years old. He took off and he went back to Israel. Ended up having another 2 kids. So shortly thereafter, I was 14 years old and I was in high school. And a buddy of mine came up to me and he said, hey, Ariel, why don't we go get drunk and smoke some weed? And me, in my infinite wisdom, at the age of 14, I said, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. So, you know, we went to the store and we bought 40 ounces of beer. And we bought 40 ounces because it's in the 90s, you know, all the 90s hip hop, we're talking about the 40 ounces. So we bought some 40 ounces and we paid $20 for about $5 of weed, as you do your first time around. And we went on the street and we smoked a little weed. We opened up those 40s. We tapped the bottle. We spilt out some for the dead homies. We didn't know any dead homies, but we spilled some out for the dead homies. As you can imagine, 2 white Jewish kids on the Upper West Side of Manhattan going, yeah, I got to spill some out for the dead homies. And we started to drink. And I drank, we had 2 of them, and I drank 1 40-ounce all to myself. And I started throwing up all over the place. And all I could think the whole time that I was throwing up was, oh my God, this feels so good. This feels so good. I love this feeling of being semi-conscious. Just that like where you're kind of unconscious, but you know what's going on around you. Just felt so, forget what was coming out of my body. That didn't matter. It was that I was unconscious. And I actually spent the next 20 years of my life trying to stay in that place, this magical place. I thought I found a higher power. I got this warm feeling. I felt like I was aligned with everything. Now, unfortunately, I never got the opportunity to use alcohol as a social lubricant. I wish I did, because that sounds like it would have been fun. For me, it was just aim for unconsciousness. My life got so out of control so quick that by the time I turned 15, I ran away from home. I dropped out of school. I was living on the streets of New York, and I already started using dry goods like cocaine and heroin. And I might mention this a couple of times because that's included in my alcoholism. My mom, who was scared for my life, was worried that I was going to kill myself, took me to court in that time, and they just got rid of this. In New York City at that time, they had something called a PINS warrant, which is PINS, person in need of supervision. So if your kid is under the age of 18, you get a PINS warrant, and the cops come and they handcuff your kid and they take him to family court. And I wasn't living at home. It took them a little while to find me, but they got the cuffs on me. And at the age of 15, I found myself in court in front of Judge Judy. See, Judge Judy, before she was a judge on TV, was a judge in family court in Manhattan. And my mom was crying that her son was killing himself, was begging for the judge's help. Sorry, guys, the messages are coming up, but that her son was killing himself. But I have rights, and they gave me a lawyer, and the lawyer sat me down, and the lawyer said, Ariel, you should really listen to what your parents want. Your parents want the best for you. They just want to help you. They want to get you help. And she spent probably 2 hours telling me I should listen to my parents and work with my parents. And at the end of these 2 hours, she said, but I am your lawyer and I'll do whatever you want. And I said, well, stick it to them. I want to be emancipated. Really so. I want to beat them in court. And the judge looked at my mother and said, well, welcome to New York. In New York, your kid has rights. And unless he breaks the law, there's nothing we can do. And I walked out of there feeling like I won at the game of life. But my mom wasn't willing to give up. And my mom hired a program called the Helping Hands. And what Helping Hands does is Helping Hands comes and kidnaps your kid from a state like New York, where your kid has rights. And I mean kidnap. They threw me in the back of the car, and we drove all the way to Omaha, Nebraska before I was willing to get on a plane. And they take you to a state like Utah, where your kid has no rights until the age of 19. And I spent 2 years in a program in Utah where they would put us up on the mountain with powdered milk, water, and rice for weeks at a time as punishment. They would make us hike 20 miles a day. We would do military workouts at 4 o'clock in the morning until about 7 o'clock in the morning. The guy that was running the program was a guy that had swastikas all over him. I got picked on and beat up a little bit for being Jewish. This is all before my 18th birthday. And I remember being there, and I remember at one time going, you know what? I can never trust another human being again. I remember the very moment that I thought that. I can never trust another human being again. Because prior to that, even though I was acting out and going out and hanging out and drinking and living on the streets, I was always honest with everybody around me. And I came to the realization that that honesty will get me in trouble. And it was at that moment when I was in Utah that I decided to fracture between what was true to me and truth to reality and what I had to show the rest of the world to feel safe. Right? This is how my character defects start forming throughout my life. So when I finally do put the drink down, I go, why do I still have problems? Right? Because I'm still wired for survival. And in those times, in those years that I spent on the mountain, the 2 years I spent on the mountain, well, it wasn't 2 years the whole time, but I mean, you're talking weeks at a time, sometimes 30 days straight all by yourself. And as you know, any place for an alcoholic when you're by yourself is just the worst place to be. And I started getting these resentments, and these resentments were spilling over. And it was resentments against my mom and resentments against my friends that I felt like they should steal a car and come break me out of there. Just resentments against everybody. And I came out of there and I spent the next 18 years of my life ripping and roaring because of those resentments. Ripping and roaring because of those resentments. And this lovely place that I spent in Utah introduced me to something called an AA meeting. And they used to force us to go to AA meetings. So anytime I went to a detox or a rehab and heard the word AA, I just tied it with my experience in Utah. So I was convinced that whatever I was going to do, one day I might get sober, but I wasn't going to do it with AA. So I tried a multitude of things. I decided I was going to become a lumberjack in northern Quebec, Canada. No experience cutting down trees. I'm from Manhattan. I'm a city boy. I was like, I'm going to become a lumberjack in northern Quebec, Canada. So I go to northern Quebec, Canada. I start cutting down trees. Never mind the fact that the first 3 weeks I was there, I was going through vicious withdrawals because my body became so physically addicted to the substances I was doing. But once I started feeling better, I was cutting down trees. And about month 3, I go, you know what? My hands hurt. I need to get out of here. And I hitched a ride all the way back to New York City. And within 24 hours, I was back off to the races. So a few months pass, maybe a year passes, and I go, you know what? I know what the problem was. The problem was when I went to get sober in Canada, I went to another country that's attached to the continent of North America. I need to get off the continent because if I get off the continent, then I'll get sober. So I decided to get on a plane and go to Italy. And I decided to become a sheep herder in Italy. And I herded sheep in Italy for a year. And I was herding sheep in Italy for a year. And I was reading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, The Course in Miracles. I mean, I was reading all these self-help books. My friends were calling me for relationship advice and spiritual advice. The whole time there, they're calling the Italian sheep herder, the Jewish Italian sheep herder. And I was quoting things from all these books, from Gary Zukov, Seed of the Soul, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, with my eyes closed. And after about a year of being sober and herding sheep, I got the itch. Not even cloud on the horizon. I go, what's going on? Like, just one more. Just one more. And I went and I ended up coming right back to New York. And within 24 hours, I was back off to the races. So I finally figured out what the problem was. The problem was not that I was on the wrong continent. I needed to go back to my childhood. So let me go back to Israel and get sober. This is me coming up with the solutions of how I'm going to get sober. So I went to Israel and I tried to get sober. And of course, within a couple of weeks, I got the itch. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get on a plane. This is when I still had money. I worked in the music industry for a while, so I could get away with this stuff. I thought it'd be a good idea to get sober in Israel. I tried to get sober. Within a couple of weeks, I said, I'm going to go back to New York, do just one more, and then I'll get on a plane again, back to Israel. And that's exactly what I did. Going through withdrawals, I get on a plane, I go to Israel, I do it one more time, and then coming back to New York, I do it one more time, then go right back to Israel as if this is going to work. I tried everything. And things just got worse and worse and worse. It got so bad that in the fall of 2010, I decided to take my life. And I was out of money. I was going through withdrawals. Things were rough. And I was on the 10th story of a building in Manhattan. And I walked out on the windowsill and I closed the window behind me because I was worried people were going to get cold. It was still cold. It was fall time. Yes, I'm that guy. And that guy's like, I'm going to kill myself, but I don't want to get blood on the rug. And I was going to jump. I was sure I was going to swan dive. I don't know how to swan dive, but in my head, it looked very sexy and romantic. And I was already playing out who was going to show up to my funeral. It was just a hot mess. And the only reason I didn't jump down is I was worried that on my way down, jumping those 10 stories, going, halfway down, I would change my mind. I was like, okay, hold on. I can't. Well, what happens if I change my mind? What happens if on my way down, before I hit the ground, somebody calls me on my phone and goes, hey, Ariel, I got some money. Let's go get some more stuff. But I was distraught and I didn't know what to do. So what I did was I came out of there. I went downstairs. I was freaking out and I called a suicide hotline. And I cried and I cried. I wanted to die. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop drinking and I couldn't stop doing drugs. I don't know what to do. And about 10 minutes into crying about how my life is destroyed, the person on the other end of the suicide hotline put me on hold. They put me on hold. I couldn't believe they put me on hold. It's like, what kind of suicide hotline is this? Why are they putting me on hold? What's wrong with these people? And about 30 seconds later, she comes back to the phone. The woman tells me, Ariel, I'm going to give you a phone number that I want you to call. And I go, okay, give me the phone number. It's a good phone number. And I'm writing his phone number down, and I hang up with her and I go call the other phone number. And it was the New York State Department of Health, whose hours are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. And they were not available to answer the phone at that time. And I was so resentful at New York City. I was thinking to myself, New York City suicide hotline, man, they must be killing thousands of people every day. They can't be treating people like this. No. I have to let the world know how New York City's suicide hotlines wronged me. And that resentment kept me alive one more day. And it wasn't until years after I got sober that I had a buddy of mine that worked at a suicide hotline. And what it is they actually have a timer that lasts about 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, you need to find out who you are, where you are, what kind of a danger you are to yourself, what kind of day. So if I was on the George Washington Bridge with a gun, the phone call would have gone different. But because so much of my misery and so much of me wanting to die had to do with substance abuse, the person on the other end of the phone made some sort of educated decision to call the New York City Department of Health to somehow get into a detox. Well, you'd think that'd be the end of it, but it wasn't. Things kept getting worse and worse and worse. It got to a point I was homeless on the streets of New York. I was eating out of garbage cans because I didn't have money for food. And when I had food stamps, I was selling that for more for the next one. Every night before I go to sleep, all I want to do is close my eyes and not open them. I just wanted to go to sleep for like 3-4 years. And then maybe wake up and see if anything got better and then go back to bed. I just wanted to sleep, permanently sleep. And the first thought that I had every morning when I woke up and opened my eyes was, oh man, not another day. Not another day. I would go to wherever it was that I was getting my stuff, whether it be the bar or the drug dealer, and I would walk there. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Oh my God, why am I doing? Oh man, I can't believe I did it. Day after day after day, just dragging my ass. And one day I walked by the 96th Street Clubhouse in New York City, and it was February and it was cold. And I was like, let me just go in here because I know they got a bathroom. I'm just going to go in there and get warm for a little bit. And I go to the meeting and I sit down. And the meeting just started when I walked in. And this woman is reading from this laminated piece of paper. And she says, if you've used any mind-altering substances in the last 24 hours, we ask that you refrain from sharing and get with someone after the meeting. And I thought to myself, who the hell? They're going to tell me whether I can talk or not? Oh, no. That's not what's going to happen. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk and I'm going to tell them how drunk I am and how high I am. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. And then she's going to say, stop, you can't talk. And I'm going to tell her where she could stick it. And that guy over there in the corner, he looks kind of sober. I'm sure he's going to stand up for her and I'm going to knock him out. And another guy, he's going to stand up for that guy, but he's kind of big. So I'll take the little guy and throw. And I had this whole scenario planned out. What I was going to do right at the end of the meeting, I was going to raise my hand and tell him I'm 3 sheets to the wind. I'm half unconscious. Stop me from talking. And just like any good newcomer, I waited till there was 1 minute left in the meeting and I spoke for 15 minutes. And nobody stopped me. Nobody said, you can't talk. Nobody said, oh, get with somebody after the meeting. They just let me rant. And I ranted, raved, and I cried. And this guy comes up to me after the meeting and he says, hey man, we're gonna go get a bite to eat at the diner. Do you want to join us? You got to remember, I'm eating a garbage can, so I don't have money to go to a diner. But I didn't tell him that. I said, nah, man, I'm good. I just ate. I'm all right. Thank you. And I don't know if he saw how rough I was. I don't know if he smelled how rough I was. But he said, well, if you come to the diner, I'll feed you. I'll pay for your food. And I said, great. Where are we going? And he took me to the diner and he fed me and he handed me this little book called the Big Book, but it was the little version. And I thought he was making a joke. He goes, this is the Big Book of alcohol. It's this little tiny guy. And he's one of these guys that's like, turn to page 35, second paragraph, 3 sentences in. You see that third word there? What is the third? Well, off the top of his head. Now, I'm putting so much stuff into my body, I can't see straight, so I'm trying to read and I'm going right into the book. And he says, well, buddy, I don't know if you can't read and you can't see this might not work. And what I heard was he wasn't going to buy me any more food. So I was like, fine. And that was the last time I saw. And I was going in at this point, I've got Medicaid. And if you don't know, in New York City, Medicaid is like the black Amex of insurance cards. I'm going in and out of detoxes like it's nobody's business. I go inside a detox. I go to a homeless shelter. I get public assistance. I make a little bit of money. I go back out. I go back into a detox over and over again. So 2 weeks after I went into this AA meeting, I go into a detox, and they bring in AA meetings into these detoxes. And I'm the guy in the paper pajamas and the paper slippers that they give you in detox because your clothes are so dirty, that's sitting there watching Law and Order right when the AA meeting comes in. And I turn around every time. Why does AA always have to come in the middle of the episode of Law and Order? It never made sense to me. Why do you guys come right in the middle of Die Hard 2, the VHS version that we're watching in the detox? Can't you see we're keeping our minds occupied and you guys can't come between the TV shows? It just never made sense to me. And I would always complain about it. And here they are. They're ringing my first night there. They're ringing this bell, ding, 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 AA meeting. And I'm just like, oh, here we go again. AA meeting right in the middle of my episode. And I get up and I turn around. And the guy that brought the meeting in was filling in for somebody else's commitment because they called him in the last second. And I turn around and I go to tell him where to stick it. And it's the only guy that I know in the whole AA program. It's the guy that took me out to eat. And I'm like, man, this is so crazy. This is so odd. He looks at me and he goes, is it odd or is it God? I see what he's doing. He's trying to get this whole religious stuff. I'm not going to play this game. No. He says, why don't you give me a call when you get out? And I did. I called him when I got out. And, you got to remember, I had no money. This guy, he's not a student anymore, but he was a student at the time. I was 34. He was 24. He had a lot of time on his hands. And he would meet me wherever I was in New York City. He would take the train to me and then swipe me on the train and take me to a meeting. But I stopped putting substances into my body. And that's when things got crazy for me. That's when things got really loony for me. And he explained to me, he goes, Ariel, the substance you were putting, drinking, the alcohol, that's not the problem, man. That was the solution. So now you got rid of your solution, you're stuck with the problem. And he was taking me to all these big book meetings. Everybody's reading the big book. Everybody's happy and laughing. And I'm going, what the hell is wrong with these people? I was the guy, the newcomer at the big book meeting. They would start reading in the big book. Everybody reads a paragraph. This person, I would count how many, go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm the fourth person. Let me prepare this paragraph. And I'd start preparing the paragraph and a little comma. There's a period there, inflection in the voice. And we're really preparing. I want to get ready. I want to show people that I can read. And I'm waiting, I'm ready. And okay. I'm third person's reading. It's my turn. Here we go. Next. Okay, he's almost done with the paragraph. Here I go. And just before I'm about to read, the genius before me decides to read 2 paragraphs. Now I'm going, oh my God, what's going to happen? I can't prepare. If I prepare the paragraph, they're going to know. I can't prepare the next paragraph. There's going to be too much of a pause. If there's a pause and it's my turn to read, there's going to be too much silence. Everybody's going to know I'm going to be figured out. Oh my God, it's my turn to read. And I start reading. I don't know what I'm reading. Words are coming out of my mouth. I didn't get a chance to prepare. I see a word from 1935 that I've never seen before. And I don't want to look like an idiot. So I just keep reading, but I want to cough a little and I keep reading. As if I read the word I didn't recognize from 1935. And then I'm done reading and I go, thank you. The next guy was reading and I'm sitting there the whole time going, oh my God, I can't believe, did you see that? That was so awful. That was so bad. I can't believe everybody noticed. Everybody thinks I'm an idiot. I wasn't there for any meeting that I went to. You took away my solution and I'm stuck with the problem. And the problem is me. And my sponsor told me, you know what? The problem is we got to do the step work. And I'm like, okay, we got to do the step work. Now I'm one of these guys that he took me through the steps in about, I was in detox for probably 10 days, but took me through the steps in about 30 days. So I was about 40 days sober when I was done with the steps. I had my first sponsee at 60 days. I listened to my first 5th step when I was around 90 days. Can you imagine that? I mean, I'm already high energy. Can you imagine me coming up listening to guys doing this 5th step and that guy's shaking and I'm shaking? That guy's still sober. a lot of the guys that I got that far into the steps are still sober today. And I can't tell, that wasn't me. That definitely wasn't the other person. That was God. My sponsor said, Ariel, look, God is all or he's nothing. He's either taking care of you or he's not. You know, you're not going to mess those people up any more than they already are messed up. Give it a shot. See what happens. You know, I know you can't sponsor anybody. You know that. They don't know that. Just take them through the steps. So, so anyway, he invites me back to him inviting me over to his house. So he invites me over to his house to do steps 1, 2, and 3. And I find out later on, I was 4 years sober at the time, he was taking his laptop and he was taking his wallet and he was hiding it under his mattress. You got to remember, I was coming off the street, right? I wasn't very clean cut. I didn't have a job. I was a little scoundrel. And he wasn't sure if I was going to take stuff. And he used to hide his laptop and his wallet from me under his mattress when I went over there to do step work. I'm now the godfather to his child. That's the miracle of this program. I didn't ask for it. I didn't think I was going to get sober. I wasn't looking to get sober. He didn't think I was going to get sober. Because I really didn't think you were going to make it. So he brings me over to his house and he goes, well, can you admit that you're powerless over alcohol in your life and become unmanageable? And I said, yeah, sure. That's not a problem. I admitted that a decade, maybe 2 decades before I even came in. I knew I was unmanageable. I knew I had no choice in the matter, that I couldn't stop drinking. I buckled down and said, all right, this is going to be my way of life. I'm going to do whatever I can to get the next one. Nothing's going to stop me. Nobody's going to stop me. No relationship, no job, nothing. Full force. You know why? Because I like being unconscious. I like being in that place between unconscious and death, just right before you pass out. I loved it. That's where I was happiest because I didn't have to deal with anything. And he said, well, can you come to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity? And I'm going, oh, here he goes, power greater than himself. I see him doing the whole religious thing on me. He's trying to get me to do this. I'm not going to do it. And what he did was he explained to me that it's broken up into 2 parts, right? When we read the pertinent ideas of A, B, and C. I was an alcoholic. I couldn't manage my own life. That's the first step. That no human power is the first part of the second step could relieve me of my alcoholism. Now, I could tell you, oh, it's the doctors or it's this or that. For me, no human power is that somehow I've got myself convinced that if I have enough money, things will be okay. If I had the right job, things would be okay. If I had the right apartment, if I had the right girlfriend, or if the current girlfriend leaves me. It's always something else that's human or somehow is related to our plane of existence that if it entered my life or exit my life, that I would be able to be sane. I would be able to manage my addiction. I would be able to manage my happiness. I could rest satisfaction if I could only manage well. Just this little tiny thing here and this little tiny thing there. I have to smash that idea. I have to get rid of the idea that somehow a human power would be able to relieve me of the insanity that I've created through my alcoholism. And then he said the second part of that third step is that that God could and would if you were salt. The beautiful part about it that I don't have to find God. I don't have to be able to quote the Bible to you. I don't have to be able to explain what God is in my life. All I have to do is seek. That's it. Just look for God. How do I look for God? I remove myself out of the equation. And I always say this is not a program of addition. It's a program of subtraction. I don't add God. I don't come in here and add God in my life. What I do is I subtract myself. And the more of myself I'm able to get out of the way, the more God connects with me. And it's like a pipeline between me and my higher power. This program is just the spiritual Drano. it clears up all the clogged stuff in the pipelines, all the fears and the resentments and the angers. And that. Most of it's justified. When you first come in here, it's all justified. But you get rid of that. And all of a sudden you've got this pipeline and you feel connected and you're going, what? So then he says, can you turn your will and your life over to the care of God? And I said, there we go again with the God word. Like, I don't know. He said, Ariel, did you turn your will and your life over to those substances you put in your body? Right? I would go and I would put something into my body and it turned out to not be what I thought it was. And I would go back to the same exact person expecting them to give me something different. You know, you run out of money, you start drinking alcohol that resembles more gasoline than it does alcohol. I always knew that if I put enough stuff into my body that I would be able to feel what I wanted to do, feel what I wanted to feel. And that's how I turned my will and I turned my life over to this power that was greater than me that completely destroyed me. And he said, it's the same thing. You've been doing it for the last 20 years. You're just going to do it in a different way. And you can't say I've turned my will and my life over to the care of God, but I'm going to sit on my fourth step. So he sits me down and he says, we do the prayer together. God, I offer myself to you. Not to me, not to my decisions, not to the cute girl that totally related to my share at the meeting. No, I offer myself to you to do with me as you will. I ask that you relieve me of the bondage to self, that I may better do your will. And that victory over those may bear witness to those that I would help. The power, the way of life, your love. And at first, when I did that prayer, it didn't really mean much to me. But as you get sober, it starts hitting you. So I went into my sponsor's house with the intention of breaking up with him because this was done. And I walked out of there doing the first 3 steps, not even realizing that I did them. And he sent me on my way to start doing my 4th step. And he said, why don't you go and make a list of all the people that have angered you? I said, yeah, sure. So I wrote a list of all the people that got me angry, which wasn't a problem. You know, I did that with every bartender and drug dealer in the city. I would sit there, talk their ear off about how angry I was at you know what the rest of the world was doing to me? So I wrote all the people that angered me. I wrote why they angered me. And then he asked me to write what part it affected. My self-esteem, my pocketbook, my ego, my pride, my sexual relations. And under that, he really touched up on fear and how the fear itself was what was triggering my character defects, if you will. Right? My need for more money somehow is the fear of not having enough of it. This is where self-reliance starts kicking in. Well, if I don't have enough money, well, what does that mean about me? And the more I ask why, what is it about the money that's going to make me happy? What is it? What if I didn't have it? What if I didn't have it? What did I always ends up to me being worthless? And how do I quench that fear of being worthless? Is what I do is I take money. I steal money to quench it. I go and run off with the first person. I was really good at this in early recovery. A girl paying attention to me, I'm ready to get married. Just a little bit of attention. I'm like, wee, this is the one. It's God working in my life. I was convinced of it. Oh my God, I was convinced of it. If you related to my share, forget about it. We're going places. Oh, and she quoted the big book. What I'm doing is I'm quenching the fear because I'm not relying that God can take care of me. And I need to take my self-reliance and take that and feed that fear. But then this is where he caught me off guard, because what he did was he asked me to start making start praying for everybody. And you got to remember, I'm like a week into AA. And I wasn't really even convinced. So I went and I did the prayers for everybody. And I was in Riverside Park in Manhattan. I was on my knees and I was running through my 4-step praying for everybody. And I was facing New Jersey. And so stupid. This woman came up to me and she goes, hey, you're facing west. You need to face east. Mecca is that way. And I go, oh, no, I'm not Muslim. No. I'm actually Jewish. And she says, what are you doing? And I didn't know what to tell her. Like, I was just happened to be on my knees in the park, not a lot of people around, but I'm facing New Jersey. And I just spilled my guts to her. I was like, well, I was drinking and shooting heroin for the last 20 years. And I just got sober a couple of weeks ago. And this guy told me that I could get sober if I do this, and wrote all these resentments down. And I started going through some of the resentments. I told her, explained to her how the fear was tied into all those resentments. And eventually she just looked at me, nodded her head, and walked away. So my apologies if I ran AA's good name through the mud to this person in Riverside Park, but I had a week sober. And then putting all the wrongs that others have done out of my mind, I had to look at where I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid. And I realized that all these resentments that I had, all the resentments that propelled me to go get that next one and that next one, that caused me to want to be unconscious, all the guilt and the shame that's tied with it, were all made up in my head. Maybe 2% of those resentments were valid and real. For me, the 2% that were valid and real all happened to me before the age of 10. The rest I created myself. I held on to a resentment. There's a guy that put me in jail. There's a guy that put me in jail, ruined my life. He made me a convicted felon. He put me in jail. I hated this guy for putting me in jail. It wasn't until I did a 4th step and a 5th step that I realized, oh, I had a part to play in it. I broke into his house and I stole $250,000 worth of vintage comic books and sold them. I am unable to see that. I am unable to see my part to play in it, even when it is so obvious. So then he asked me to write my fear inventory, and I start writing down my fear inventories. I'm watching that clock. And he asked me to do the sex inventory, and I'm doing the sex inventory, and I keep calling him, and I'm like, yo, I think I'm doing it wrong. And he goes, why? I go, because the same stuff just keeps repeating over and over again. He's like, oh, no, you're doing it right. You're doing it right. And then he takes me through 6 and 7, and he reminds me about those fears, right? The fears that I'm not good enough, the fear that somehow I need to quench just enough money. I need to get just enough money or the right girl, the right apartment that makes these character defects flare up. And then I end up acting on the character defects, which causes some sort of reaction. And then they retaliate. And then I get a resentment. And he showed me this whole cycle. But here's the catch. He said, Ariel, you can't fight your own character defects. I mean, if you're sitting there going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's like, go back to drinking. You'll be happier. Let God remove them. Let God remove the things that you find objectionable. And the ones that you don't want to let go out, at least ask for the willingness. And then I go to 7, and I humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings. I said, God, have all of me, good and bad. Not just some of the stuff, all of me, good and bad. And remove the character defects, and here's the kicker, that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Because there are some character defects that are very, very helpful. Some of the things that I learned, like survival skills, like my sense of humor, maybe my personality, might be really, really helpful to carry the message to the newcomer. It was a character defect my whole life. It was a survival skill. It got me out of a lot of fights out of jail. When I was in jail, I got out of a lot of fights because of that personality. Now, he doesn't remove that. Why isn't he removing that? Because I think it's useful to him and my fellows. Right now, here I am. I'm starting to clean out my garbage, and I'm starting to see the light, and things are starting to make sense. And now I need to make a list of all the people that I harmed, because first of all, I started making it when I was doing the 4th column, but sometimes there are people on that list that weren't on the resentment list. And I'll tell you what the difference is. This is the gist of it. If I got caught, they were on the resentment list. If I didn't get caught, they weren't on the resentment list. I had to write an 8th step. That's the conclusion I came to. I only resent people that catch me. If you catch me red-handed, I'm embarrassed, you go on my resentment list. If I get away with it, it's just guilt. I can deal with it. So I have to, so I start making amends, and I think it's important to mention this. So one of the people that was at the top of my resentment list was my stepmother. My dad passed away. He left a lot of money, none of which I saw because it was in Israel. My stepmom got involved, and I was too busy with my addiction, my alcoholism, to be able to get on a plane to go to court. This is a woman I haven't seen since I was 15 years old. Right? And sure enough, because she's on my resentment list, she's also on my amends list. And I got to make an amends with her. And I had a great plan. I was going to get 5 years sober. When I got 5 years sober, I was going to take a flight to Israel. I was going to make amends to her. We're both going to cry on each other's shoulder. It was so beautiful. And gotta be. This is the same plan that I made when I was like showing up to my first AA meeting and said, I'm going to knock her out for talking back to me. I'm going to knock that guy out. I'm great at making plans. I'm a fortune teller. I'm just like the world's worst fortune teller. You know, I can always tell you what's going to happen in the future, but it's always wrong. I'm 30 days sober at the time. I'm on my 9th step, living on my mother's couch. My mom finally let me back into her house and wasn't walking around with her purse. Actually, I think it took another couple of months for her not to walk around with her purse. And this woman who I haven't seen in 20 years at that time just happened to be in New York and came and knocked on the door. And I was like, oh my God, Earl the Pearl, call Mr. Sponsor Pants. Mr. Sponsor Pants. I don't know what to do. Oh my God, she's here. What do I do? He goes, well, pray for the willingness. So I ran to the bathroom. I go and I get down on my knees. I prayed. I get back up. I called him. It didn't work. It didn't work. What do I do? I was freaking out. You know, and his response, like always, was it odd or is it God? And I spent 3 days with this woman while she was laid over in New York. She had a layover in New York, spending 3 days in New York before she went to Vegas, to the casinos. Don't know if it had to do with anything with my dad's money or not, but it didn't matter to me. It did for the first 3 days. But at a certain point, that fear was lifted. I was able to look her to the eyes and make an amends to her. Now, I didn't do a lot of damage at the age of 15, up to the age of 15 to her. But my dad was physically abusive to her. Anytime she raised her voice at me, my dad ignored his other 2 kids because he was paying so much attention to me. He was always buying me new sneakers, but wouldn't pay for their camp or their daycare. And he was gone. And I told her, I said, look, as I was making amends for any damage that I might have done, I was carrying 23 of my father's chromosomes. So I felt the need to apologize or attempt to amend some of my father's behaviors that he was doing in the name of his affection for me. And she lost it. She lost it. I didn't mention God. And this is a woman from Israel, heavy smoker. She talks like this all the time. I've never heard her talk about God. For the next 3 hours that I spent with her, she did nothing but talk about God. I'm one of those alcoholics that comes in this program and I've got nothing. And God just throws stuff in my way. Just gives it to me, hands it to me. My sponsor literally goes, Ariel, I get irritated with how much God works in your life. Now, whether I see it or not is my choice. I get to see it if I'm clear. If I'm not, I'm sitting at home in the fetal position going, oh no, what's happening with my life? Right? Now, here's the problem. I started seeing my part to play in things. I start cleaning up the wreckage of my past, but I'm a human being. And apparently when you're a human being, things will crop up. Other resentments, other insecurities, other fears, they will crop up, right? That's what the 10th step is. When they crop up, not if they crop up. But the 10th step also promises me if I don't rest on my laurels and I stay in fit spiritual condition, that I will cease fighting anything and everyone. I've been fighting like a salmon swimming upstream. When I got a year sober, I remember I woke up in the morning and I'm like, yes, take that, stick it, I did it. And I realized I was coming from a place of anger because somehow I felt that the world around me wanted me to fail. There wasn't a single individual that wanted me to fail. I was getting nothing but cheered on Even during my drinking days, people were like, Ariel, you're so special. You need to get your life together. But somehow I've created this story and I was fighting the world when the world wasn't fighting me. The best is when you get sober and you think everything's good and you sit on your 10 steps and all of a sudden you get fired. You have a breakup. My first sober breakup, wow. I was in the fetal position for 4 months. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Somehow, at a certain point, by not looking at my part, not doing the 10th step and not looking at those fears and those insecurities, the girlfriend or the job or whatever it is starts to replace my higher power. And I can always ask myself when I do an 11th step at night, what was my higher power today? By what was it I was thinking about the most? Was I thinking about the job? Was I thinking about my financial insecurity the most? Because, when you got financial insecurity, you think about that a lot. Oh my God, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to fix it? How am I going to fix it? That's such a dangerous place for me. How am I going to fix it? Or I should do this. Or I should do that. That's me getting back in the driver's seat. And I'm one of those alcoholics. I can't even be in the passenger seat. If I'm in the passenger seat, I'm going to be pulling the steering wheel from him every once in a while. If I'm in the back seat, I'm going to be like, what are you doing? No, not a left here. Make a right there. I'll open the back door and jump out while, you got to put me in the trunk. You got to lock me up in the damn trunk so I can't get out. That's how bad I am. And I get to 11 and I start asking myself at night, I go, what do I do at night? Where have I been? Have I added into the stream of life or did I take away? Was I thinking about others or was I thinking about myself? Because I got to tell you, most of the time I'm thinking about me. But if I start asking myself at that night, where do I owe an apology? Is there something I need to share with somebody at once? And my favorite part of the 11th step is that when we're agitated or doubtful, we pause. Pause. That's something I have a very hard time doing. We pause and we ask for the next right direction and intuitive thought. Because when we do that, we're much less in danger of excitement, worry, remorse, fear. Here's the kicker to this. We're much less in danger of excitement. Somehow I've always missed that word. Excitement. When I get excited, I think it's God working my life. But it's not. When I get excited, I shut down from listening to anything. Because I'm convinced this is it. The multi-million-dollar, I don't know what a multi-million-dollar contract looks like, but I'm just saying the multi-million-dollar contract, right? That's excitement. I don't listen to God. I'm signing that. How much money? That sounds great. Delicious. The girl that relates to my share that comes to me after the meeting, like, you're so cute, Pause. And when I pause and I do that, all of a sudden I have all this energy because I'm not exhausted. I'm not exhausted like the 20 years I was before coming in here. I'm not exhausted like I was in my early recovery because I'm not running the show. And then thanks, brother. And then I get to the 12th step. And I start to carry this message. How do I carry this message? I go to guys. I know how good of a place I'm in. When I go to a meeting and they're having people introducing newcomers and I'm going clock, 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 clock. And I got to go to them afterwards. I know when I'm not in a good place where I'm sitting in a meeting going, just wait till I share. Oh, I'm going to drop pearls of wisdom. People are going to go, oh my God, you're so spiritual and funny all at once. And then the cute girl in the corner will relate to my share. When I'm able to think what it is that other people need, right? I carry this message by taking people through the steps and explaining to them what it is how it makes sense to me. My sponsor told me early on, he said, I'm going to take you through the steps. None of this is going to make sense to you. Do you know how you're going to get really good at the steps? You're going to take other people through the steps. And in the beginning, you're going to have to call me. And I did. I used to call him and be like, oh, that thing with the prayer, the third step. What page is that on? Okay, I'll call you back. And then they'll be like, okay, it's on this page. And we do the prayer. And I'll be like, okay, what do I do now? I had no idea what I was doing, but it didn't matter because there's nothing I can do to get anybody sober or to make anybody relapse. All I can do is show up and try to carry the message. Somebody once told me, Ariel, we carry the message. And sometimes, only sometimes do we actually speak. And the first page of the 12th step, before it tells us what we need to do with working with others and helping, it says, when you meet somebody, we listen to their story. We listen to their story because the way that I relate to one individual is not going to be the same way that I relate to another individual. And it's that relation when I relate to somebody where things go click, because now the person that's felt alone their whole lives, the person that felt like they've never belonged, all of a sudden feel like they can be seen and they can be heard and they can be understood for the first time in their lives. I used to go to my sponsor and say, hey, Mr. Sponsor, this is my problem, A, B, C, D, D, D. And he wouldn't give me a solution. He would laugh about it and say, ha ha, me too. And I thought to myself, well, you mean I'm not the only one? Guys, if I felt like I was the only one, do you think I'd be sitting there telling you that I love it when the cute girl relates to my share? If I thought I was the only one, do you think I'd be sitting there telling you how I prepare to read the right next paragraph? No, we're all the same kind of sick. The fact that people are shaking their heads going, yeah, me too, that's the magic. And for me, I believe that God hangs out in the space between two alcoholics. In that space, it's like music. It's not the musical notes that make the music. If all you had was musical notes, it would sound like, it's the space between the notes that makes the music. It's the space between two alcoholics or a bunch of alcoholics that brings God in. It's the pause. And that, in my recovery, where I am now, is one of the hardest things for me to do that I'm trying to fine tune, is the pause. Because when I don't pause, what I'm doing is I'm saying I don't rely on God enough. I need to do the next thing to make sure that I get what I need to do. Only if I can manage well, things will be okay. Just need to pause. And with that, I want to thank everybody for listening to me share for almost an hour. Thank you.